first video together.
Yeah, about time.
How has that taken so long?
It's crazy. We've known each other for so long, and we finally made it happen. And we're going to find if it works.
Maybe it's because we live so far apart. Maybe.
I know. We only
like 6 minutes today to get to my place.
Yeah, exactly. All 6 minutes in North London. But I'm glad because I think we can bring. Collectively, we've got a lot of experience in doing this stuff. We're not just doing a book smart, but we can talk about how it works in reality, or in our reality at least.
Absolutely. Shall we introduce ourselves?
Let's do it.
Well, hi, I'm Karim Harbert.
I'm Jem Jalal.
What are we talking about today?
Well, we were talking about the Scrum Master Journey, or the journey of a Scrum Master. Where do I start? Where do I go? Where does this thing lead? People seem to be confused, and at best, some people think that the next step has got to be Agile Coach. Is that right? Is that wrong? So I think it would be cool for us to talk about our journey.
Yeah. I get that a lot as well from my students and people I work with. It's just how do I get good at this?
Yeah.
And what do I need to know? Like, because there's a perception that you're just working with the team. It's just a bit about facilitation. It's just a bit about team coaching. Mm-hmm. There's a whole world of stuff out there that can help you as a Scrum Master on your journey. So
yeah, there's a whole spectrum. I mean, when we say how to get good at anything, what does good mean? And one of the things I think about are, what are the responsibilities of a Scrum Master? That's a good kind of compass, isn't it? You think of team, you think of product, you think of organisation, and ideally you want to be equally good at all these things.
Yeah,
right?
they're the three main focuses, right? Lots of people are kind of very focused on the team. Mm-hmm. Some are focused on the product owner and helping with them. Very few are focused on the organisation. But even within the team, there's still a bunch of stuff that we need to get good at, right? When I think back to my journey, team dynamics, I didn't know much about that. Mm-hmm. Facilitation, mentoring, teaching, coaching, all of these things. I didn't know. I mean, I was a project manager, right? Right. I was a project manager, and I was told, go and do this thing. You need to be a Scrum Master. And me being me, I said, sure, I'll give that a go. No idea what it was. and it was about learning on the journey. Now, that was 2007, 2006 time, and there just wasn't as much out there as there is now. So it was a voyage of discovery for me over a few years before I got semi-competent at that.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think 2006, 2007, I didn't feel very supported in my role at all. Even the person that hired me, as well-intended as they were, they didn't really know what I was trying to do. My role was meant to be running meetings and making sure people turn up on time. But I just want to step back into what you said. You said something really interesting. You spoke about mentorship or coaching or facilitation. All of these things are real skills within themselves. And I spoke about the responsibilities of team, product, organisation. I want to regurgitate that. But those skills that you've spoken about, they all can live within those responsibilities. And they all take on a bit of a different dynamic. Do you see what I'm saying? So to be really good at all of those skills or those hats or whatever you want to call it in any one of those responsibilities, that's no easy thing.
It's no easy thing. You have to first learn how to coach and mentor, right? But you'll be doing that across the organisation. You'll be doing it for the programmer who maybe needs some support with how they communicate and collaborate. For another member of the development team on how are we writing our backlog items, our user stories, how are we writing our acceptance criteria. You can help them with that. But also, product owners, often very senior roles, and then there's the organizational change side. You find yourself coaching leaders on a whole bunch of stuff, and that's a skill set in its own right, because quite rightly, some of them have said, well, what are your credentials in leadership? Who are you to coach me, right?
Sure.
And so you really have to arm yourself with a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience to try and start doing those things. So in some ways, it's a little unfair for new Scrum Master to say you're now an organizational change agent and product strategy coach and team dynamics expert and facilitation guru.
It's intimidating. Yeah.
How do I get good at all that stuff? That's these
true.
are all careers in their own right.
Yeah.
And again, that's the challenge, right? Thankfully, there's more out there now than there was back when we were starting out. For me, it was read a few Mike Cohn books, maybe a Lisa Atkins book, right? And then you're on your own, right? And I didn't do my Scrum training until I'd been a Scrum Master for 5 or 6 years, because that's just how it worked out, right? But even back then, there was the 2 days, and then there wasn't much support, and there wasn't much out there. So I guess, the more we can put out there now to help people on their journeys, because it's daunting.
It is. I mean, it's interesting because there is a lot of information out there, and there's lots of meetups. There's an amazing community of people. There's so much literature, and it's almost like the opposite problem to what we had. So there wasn't this abundance, but sometimes when there is too much, the new problem now is where to begin.
Yeah, what to ignore.
Yeah, exactly.
Because whilst there's a lot of great information out there, there's a lot of information which, let's just say, is less great, and probably might not be as helpful to people on their journeys. So, what or who really inspired you when you were at the start of your journey?
To be honest, I didn't do this on purpose. So I fell into my role, and somebody asked me to do some of these meetings after I'd seen a team on another floor with lots of posters. And I saw a software development team who were energized, talking, and I was invited along to watch.
It's like fun, right?
Yeah, and that's right. And it all began from there. And like any new Scrum Master, I was very mechanistic. I was concerned about the events, following the events in a binary way. And I didn't quite realise that there's so much, there's a really strong humanistic element to Scrum. How about yourself? How did you bump into it?
So like you, I was a project manager before, and I was just like, right, you're doing this thing, and so I had to learn how to do it, and I approached it in a very project manager like way, and I don't say it to be disparaging. I think there's some great project managers out there, but the Scrum Master role is very, very different, right? And it took me a while to recognise that. One of my earlier roles, it wasn't my first. I feel like I got very good at the theory of Scrum, and I knew how the events should run, and I knew in my head what a good user story should look like, how acceptance criteria should be written. I knew, I kind of knew a lot. I knew how to do planning and forecasting. Yep. But what I used to do was to tell the team, this is how you need to do it. I was a very directive Scrum Master, if you can call it that. I would say, you need to do this, you need to do that. My aha moment was I was working with a team, and we got to the point where we were pretty good. I was feeling good about myself, right? I've got this team working pretty well. Right. Say, me, still that I mentality, right? And then I went on holiday.
Okay.
And then I came back from holiday.
Right.
And the team had just fallen apart. Like nothing had moved, nobody was doing anything. And I remember pulling my hair out thinking, what's wrong with you? Right? And then I sat back in a moment of reflection, and I realised nothing was wrong with them. Everything was wrong with me. Wow. And I thought, wow, I hadn't helped them to get good at this stuff. I'd just been spoon feeding them. I'd been telling them what to do. And I thought, man, I need to learn how to help them get better, help the product owner do it for them. It's the old adage of, I was teaching them, I was giving them fish, and I wasn't teaching them how to catch their own fish. And then I went and they didn't have any fish.
Got you.
And I took that. I owned that, coupled with a chance encounter. I went to a meetup. Thankfully, we're both Londoners, and there's a healthy scene. And I went to a meetup, and a great speaker came, and he was talking about coaching. Okay. Right? Really, really great guy, and he didn't know me from Adam at that point. And I approached him afterwards, and I said, I've got this thing, and he just, with a few words, he may or may not be aware of this, had such a dramatic effect on my approach. I then went down the coaching road, and I started my journey for multiple years, culminating in getting real, becoming an ICF, PCC. But I just completely changed the way I worked. Wow. And so those two things happening together really kind of set me off down that coaching road. And now I'm not that I Scrum Master now, but I became a very hands-off Scrum Master there. So that was the turning
creating the kind of like you were creating space between the people, but it felt. Here's the thing though, I wouldn't be too hard on yourself, because I can see where you're coming from. If you're hired into a role and the person who's hired you has no mastery in that role, you're kind of on your own, and you've got to figure things out for yourself. And there's good and bad parts of that, because once you make the mistake yourself, you quickly recognise why you shouldn't go there again. So you might hear it theoretically or read in a book, but to experience it is even more powerful. And I experienced the same thing. The person who I reported to, although they had much life experience and skill in other places, they weren't able to help me learn the Scrum Master role well. And just like you, I was quite directive. I was more concerned about mechanics rather than things like, really giving the autonomy, really creating the space. Things that Dan Pink spoke about in 2010 around intrinsic motivation and purpose. And to help a product owner, I did not have a Scooby where to begin. Like, hold on, one of my responsibilities as a product owner, I've never run a business. I don't quite know how to do forecasting. I'm not the Dragon's Den or the Shark Tank type. Where do I start? And so once I started learning and the information was being illuminated, it was a double-edged thing, because in one way I felt excited, in the other way I felt intimidated. Are you with me? I'm like, oh my God, I'm a Scrum Master. I should be, like you said, a product badass, an organizational change psychologist, and a great team level.
You realise how much there is you don't know.
So broad.
Do you know what? I was driving along and Erica Badu was on, and that line, a man who knows something knows that he knows nothing at all.
Yes.
And I pinged my wife. I was like, I'm going to put that quote in one of my slides. And she's like, do you ever stop thinking about Scrum? Right? But it's true, right? As soon as you start that journey, you realise, man, there's so much more to this than those 18 pages of the Scrum Guide. There's a whole world out there, and where do you start? So if a new Scrum Master came to you today and he said, or she said, help me out. How do I grow in this role? What would your advice be?
Where to begin? I mean, one of the things that I like is you introduced something tangible. So there's many ways to answer this question, but I remember you made something called the Scrum Master Wheel, and I loved it because you do need a compass sometimes, and I think that's a good place to start. Like, and maybe spontaneously, this series could be us introducing this wheel and then getting stuck into each of these elements. So, back to you, really. Tell us about the wheel.
The wheel of Scrum Master.
Yeah.
So this is something I've developed. I kind of more recently in my career done a lot of mentoring and coaching and capability building of Scrum Masters. Yeah. Because people talk a lot about the CSM class, right? And whatever your view is on that, it's a great introduction. It is not designed to be something that churns out Scrum Masters who are brilliant at the job, right?
It's not mastery, right?
It's kind of, right, you've done your theory test, now go learn how to do the job, right? And it's that learning how to do the job, and you need coaching and guidance. So I do a lot of that stuff. And so we created this wheel, which is just, here's what I think are the areas of competency. Again, it's just my view on it. And it's things like, you have to have a deep knowledge of Scrum and Agile and Lean and all of the theory behind that. I think that really helps.
But the knowledge itself.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Okay. You have to know that stuff and why it works and why it's effective and the roots of it going back to Toyota and beyond, right? Then you have to think about, well, team dynamics. What makes a great team? How can I help this team become a great self-organising, empowered, really effective team who do great work and collaborate and communicate well together?
Okay, so that's the humanistic part, like just groups of people, any social system, how do things interact?
Exactly.
Okay.
Then there's the faciltation. This is an area I'm weak, right? My facilitation isn't as tight maybe as it could have been. I'm a bit more relaxed on that stuff, but it's an art to be a great facilitator.
Sure.
Right? Then there's the product stuff you touched on, right? How can I help the product owner be the best they can? You need to know about product strategy. Again, that's something that is not necessarily core to what we do, because a lot of us come through the kind of programming or testing or business analysis route. It's not core.
Sure.
Then there's coaching, mentoring, educating, right? Organizational change. That's a whole thing in its own right.
I mean, you've spoken about at least 6 or 7 things here.
Yeah.
On this wheel, right?
And so on this wheel, we get people to do a self-assessment on there, and that drives the conversation. Here's where I am. Here's where I'd like to be. Right. How do we close that gap? Right. What exercises can we do? What training? What reading? How can we work together to move you from A to B in a standard coaching conversation? And people find that to be a useful technique. It's my view on it. I've spoken to another 5 or 6 people about it. They have a different take on how you cut that up. It's an artificial split because they're so overlapping, but I found that to be really useful.
Here's the thing, right? I think everybody will improve, right? If they go to meetups and they read books or they do a course or they do the job. The question is though, how can you improve on purpose? Are you with me? And if you're able to have some sort of compass, and this is why I love the wheel, and I fully endorse this approach, it lets you know where you are. Like, I really wish I had something like that to start with. So just have an awareness of like, oh right, these are the things that would help me. You call them competencies. Okay, well, here's where I am in those competencies, and here's the gap. I wonder what I could do to close the gap. And as with every job and every role, your experience and your skills and your competencies will go through waves.
Yeah.
You know, you might join a gig, which I'm about to do, where I've said, look, I don't really want to do the organisational stuff at the moment. I want to go back to the essence. I want to work with two teams at the coalface, and I want to be in the mix. You with me?
Helping teams grow. That's super fun.
Oh, exactly. And it is, that's the word, is fun. There's nothing wrong with working at C-level. There's nothing wrong with the executive coaching stuff. It's great, it's cool. But one of the reasons I started off doing this is I want to be in the mix with the people. Yeah. So what I'm trying to show you is you can get stale. You know, it's natural if you're teaching all the time or you're at executive level, when you're away from the people doing the work, you know, you might be like, oh, I want to sharpen up there. So in many ways, I guess we still 10 plus years on are looking at our competencies, right?
Yeah, for sure.
You know what I mean? We want to stay sharp with it.
And one of the funnily enough, when I created the self-assessment, I took the self-assessment and I realised my product strategy knowledge was not anywhere near where it needed to be. I actually found a big gap in my knowledge, and I've been educating myself ever since. And so fortunate enough that some people who really get that stuff have helped me get it more. I'm never going to get it to the point where I get some of those other things where I feel like I really am strong in.
Yes.
But it's better and it's good enough, right? You kind of focus on your strengths, manage your weaknesses. That was definitely one of mine, and it really helped me understand that and my limitations in that area, which I've tried to mitigate.
I love that. I mean, this could be a spin-off for another video, but what you just said is fascinating. You've got to learn and find out what you're most interested in your Scrum Master role. And like I'm the same as well. I fight my fight. In other words, what I mean by that is I go to where my bliss is, and that's with the people and the interactions piece. I have no issue with products and profitability. These things are absolutely important because we're meant to be enabling these things indirectly by the team bringing value. But there's something about that, right? Knowing what you want rather than trying to force yourself to do something which isn't really, an intrinsic desire that you have.
Yeah. I never loved facilitating, right? And so I always encouraged other members of the team to step up and facilitate these activities because it's not my core strength. Yeah, you got to follow your passion, and my passion has taken me to organizational culture and org design. I love that stuff, right? But I don't forget my first love, which is team dynamics and working with teams, and that was something I really, really enjoyed.
It rolls up, brilliant. I mean, where can they find the Scrum Master Wheel? Is it something we can share with the guys? I don't know if we can add it into the link.
We can add it into the link. There are ways of doing that.
Yes.
And I'm hoping. So what you'll see is kind of the overview, and I've written a blog post about it. I hope at some point I can open source the whole model behind it, and so people can take their own self-assessments and the reading lists behind each of those areas, which have really helped me to grow in those areas. I guess now I've said it, I'm going to have to. So hold me to that, please. Yeah,
and here's another thing. There's one of the things that Tobias Mayer, he's led, and I chipped in now and again, and so did other members in the community. You've probably seen this. He's got something called the Scrum Master Journey, which you can check out as well. But whatever it is, all of these approaches, know this, and I'm not talking for you, Karim, it doesn't happen overnight. This is why it's a journey. It takes, I believe, quite a few years to get good at this role. And people shouldn't feel bad knowing that. You see, the CSM, as you said, is surface level, it's great, but that's where the learning begins.
My friend and colleague uses the phrase, a CSM on education, it makes you more coachable, right? It gets you that base level of understanding, bang, now we can help, right? Absolutely, it's a multiple year journey. I was probably at least 3 or 4 years in before I felt I could call myself a competent Scrum Master, right? And I made a lot of mistakes. And to anyone who was on the team that I was working with, sorry, right? But you've got to learn somehow. And then you start feeling like you have to go. But every individual needs to own their growth in that area, right? There are people who can advise and can point you in the right direction, but if you don't own it, if you don't want it, you're not going to do the work.
Yeah, and this is why, it's more of a kind of, you'll hear spiritual fables and these types of things, that if you were to put a log next to a log which is on fire and burning, you're going to up your game, you're going to accelerate, whether it's an instrument, martial arts or an education piece. So getting yourself a mentor, I mean, for me, makes all the difference. But back to what Karim's saying, the ownership's on you. And I think we're in a great place in the 21st century where there's loads of information out there. and there's a real practical tool. I don't know, is the wheel a tool? Is that fair to?
I would call it a tool.
A tool?
Yeah, it's a
Okay.
tool.
Yeah.
It's an imperfect, but I found it to be effective tool.
Some sort of guidance. Okay, I mean, we can wrap this up.
Yeah.
Who knows? We may do like a series. It'd be amazing if we split out each of those segments. I don't know.
That'll be fun.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, Karim, look, thank you very much. I've enjoyed it.
Thanks, my man.
Awesome. Thank you. Yep. Let us know what you think.
Yeah, comments are always great. Feedback, funny that, being Agile coaches, we like feedback, so please, and anything else you might want to hear us talk about, please let us know that. So thank you, and hope that was useful to you, and we'll be doing more of these, don't worry.
Look forward to it. Thanks again. Cheers.